Thomas Reed lived austerely in a ramshackle shack, its chaotic exterior belied a meticulously organized interior. He awoke rigidly at 5:00 a.m., daily adhering to a strict regimen, making his bed, polishing old boots, and cleaning his tin coffee pot. By 6, strong coffee and leather oil scented his sparse living area, where every sound carried clearly. He managed on $1.13 monthly, mending clothes and repairing his own car. Yet this disciplined life was shadowed by Agent Orange. Effects from Vietnam, sudden dizzy spells, and a burning itch beneath his forearm scars, diagnosed as skin cancer by the VA. Reed seldom spoke of the war, though occasional bursts of agitation surfaced. Locally, he was simply the quiet repairman who fixed lawnmowers and latches for little more than satisfaction in the work inside his home. Only neatly bundled VA letters evidenced a 3-decade conflict, a trail of rejected claims citing insufficient evidence or demanding additional documentation. A severe dizziness episode while gardening brought concerned neighbor Mrs. Ilkins, whose worries he dismissed. Later, a visit from Army comrade Bill Carter offered grim solidarity over shared VA struggles, Bill remarking bitterly, "I swear they're just waiting us out." Their conversation touched the war only lightly, focusing instead on day-to-day challenges. As Reed strictly maintained his schedule, his discipline shielding him against awaiting an unseen resolution. After Bill left, Reed withheld the returning itch until alone. Within the shack, the spotless bed, gleaming boots, and orderly shirts stood as the solitary realm remaining completely under his control. A severe dizzy spell weeks later caused Thomas to slip violently in the shower, leaving him huddled on the cold floor, amidst overwhelming dizziness and burning itch. Lingering soreness finally drove him to the town clinic. Dr. Harris, after examination, expressed concern that his worsening skin inflammation and balance problems likely stemmed from his Vietnam service and Agent Orange exposure. He urgently referred Thomas for dermatology, neurology, and blood work, stressing he must present these findings to the VA. Thomas responded with weary resignation, noting 30 years of similar efforts had yielded only vague assurances they were working on it. The following weeks dissolved into exhausting medical visits, biopsies, endless blood draws, neurological exams, each intrusion shattering his cherished daily structure, while specialists confirmed his skin lesions aligned with chemical exposure and agreed the dizziness required investigation. Their cautious, non-committal language offered little hope for finally swaying the VA. New correspondence predictably demanded documents he'd repeatedly submitted before. Frustration compelled Thomas to retrieve an old wooden box from his wardrobe. Inside lay war relics, dog tags, a fragile jungle map, inscribed with forgotten hills and faded photos of a much younger self before a Huey helicopter. He carried the entire box and dog tags to the VA office. The clerk accepted them with detached politeness, uttering the hollow, familiar refrain, "We're working on it." Thomas departed silently, acutely aware of the absent metal weight, and rode home in wordless defeat. He placed the emptied box back on the shelf. Sitting in the quiet shack over cold coffee, the clerk's empty words blended with the battery of tests, the doctor's guarded tones, and the strange, pallid leaves marked on that jungle map in his mind. As he lay back, the sound of incessant rain pounding on thick leaves, canvas, and skin suddenly pierced decades of silence, flooding his senses and transporting him irrevocably back to the jungle. The jungle's grip returned forcefully, rain striking like ropes distant, helicopters throbbing. At 20, young Thomas slogged through dark mud in suffocating heat. Corporal Jensen pointed to trees diseased, pale blue-green leaves spider-veined like shattered glass. They camped where copters circled low, air acrid with chemicals. At dawn, skeletal branches clawed the sky. Decades later, VA doctors confirmed herbicide exposure. But young Thomas only felt the wet slap of dying leaves against his skin, a sensation echoed decades later by the burning itch in his scarred forearm. Back at his kitchen table, cold coffee beside a silent radio, the memory faded, yet the war's profound legacy endured, etched into his bones. Above the table, a feed store calendar bore relentless red slashes, each a recorded VA call. Denial letters arrived with grim regularity. Additional documentation required. Claim under review. He opened each, carefully binding the rejected claims into twine-tied bundles. A silent archive of unfinished conflicts over diner coffee. He and Bill Carter traded the VA's hollow refrain, "We're working on it," sharing humorless laughter, acknowledging a bitter truth. Seasons passed. Thomas cut grass at dawn, tightened hinges for Mrs. Wilkins, and sat awake on the porch battling nighttime itching that burned like ants beneath his skin. Bill occasionally brought old field manuals. They turned musty pages silently. Amid dizziness and bureaucratic indifference, Thomas kept his shack with military precision, boots perfectly aligned, shirts sharply folded, floors scrubbed. Weekly, outside wind rattled tin patches, but inside, order reigned, a steadfast bulwark against encroaching chaos and testament to decades of waiting. The red pen lay tucked in a coffee tin. The phone rested untouched. Faint hope lingered that someday the letter might finally come. Thomas maintained his rigid routine. Pungent coffee sipped from the same spot each morning, its scent blending with oiled leather. He fixed any loose hinge or unsteady chair leg immediately, a habit extending to neighbors' mailboxes and driveways. That summer he meticulously rebuilt his porch steps. Inside the shack, faded photos in a simple frame provided his only personal touch. Quiet afternoons found him oiling hinges for silence or sitting motionless on the porch, cold coffee forgotten, eyes fixed on the empty road stretching away. In late September, an unusually thick VA envelope arrived. Placing it carefully on the table, Thomas opened it and saw the prominent word, "Approved." Relief surged as he scanned pension details and potential back payments. He called Bill, a lightness in his voice unseen for years. They finally did it. Approved. Bill promised celebratory steaks. But Tomas then noticed the smaller print, "Approved for review." It signified only another bureaucratic step, no final approval or payment. The brief warmth vanished. When Bill arrived, the grill stayed cold. They sat silently on the porch, the unopened meat between them, the deceptive letter visible through the screen door. By evening, Thomas had added it to his bound bundle of denials and carved another thick red slash on the calendar. By November, the lesions on his arms thickened to sandpaper, the burning itch relentless, often driving him to numb his forearms under freezing water before dawn. His dizziness also intensified. Tightening a hinge on Mrs. Wilkins' gate, the ground tilted violently. He gripped the post, dismissing her alarmed questions with a tight voice. Later, brushing his teeth, a ferocious spell slammed him to his knees. Dr. Harris ordered more tests, stressing his worsening balance could no longer be ignored. At the clinic the following week, Bill's wife brought news Bill was hospitalized with severe lung complications. Visiting the ward, Thomas found his friend frail, an oxygen cannula beneath his nose. "Looks worse than it is," Bill rasped, shallow breaths betraying his words. "Sure," Bill whispered weakly, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. "As soon as the VA decides I'm fit for duty." The familiar joke fell heavily in the sterile room. Returning to his shack that night, Thomas sat in darkness, hands pressed flat on the worn table, his rough skin catching on the wood grain. How much longer? He asked the silent, empty space. The stacked VA bundles offered no reply. The call came on a piercing January morning. Bill's wife, her voice thin with grief, said, "He passed early this morning." Sunlight streamed through Thomas's window, casting lace-like shadows across the rebuilt porch steps. "I'm sorry," he replied, the words echoing emptily in his silent shack. 3 days later, beneath a steel-gray sky, damp earth and pine filled the cemetery air. Thomas stood at the back, hat in hand, boots planted firmly on frozen ground, watching Bill's flag-draped casket between crisp servicemen. He observed the honor guard fold the flag into a precise, silent triangle presented to Bill's grieving wife. The cloth's perfect symmetry struck Thomas as a cruel perfection, arriving tragically late, order imposed only when it could no longer save anyone. After the rifle volley faded, Thomas lingered, resting his palm on the cold wood. "See you on the other side, Bill," he murmured. Back in the shack, abandoned, cold coffee deepened the silence. The image of the folded flag haunted him, accompanied by an unspoken question echoing through his chores. When will it be my turn? February's predictable VA letter arrived, bearing the familiar hollow phrase, "Your claim remains under review." He folded it into the fraying bundle of denials. That evening, sitting on the porch in the biting cold, he vividly recalled, before Bill, young in the rain, frail, in the hospital bed, and the flag's stark precision. A faint glimmer arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. Sarah Collins, from the VA, called, her voice carrying disbelief and a hint of shame as she acknowledged his 30-year struggle. "I'm flagging it for immediate review," she stated clearly, promising her supervisor would personally see it by week's end. Though wary, Thomas sensed her sincerity in the statement. "I'm not them." Later, he meticulously swept the steps and polished his boots, a quiet nod to this shift. 2 days later, a thinner envelope arrived. It announced his claim was in the final stages of adjudication, with a decision expected in the next year's first quarter, the first concrete time frame ever offered. Sitting on the cold porch that night, letter in his lap, he imagined Bill beside him on the worn planks. "They might actually finish it," he said aloud into the biting wind, a fragile hope hanging in the frigid air. The final letter arrived mid-November. "Your claim has been finalized. Full pension benefits will be dispersed starting in April." He read each word slowly. April felt simultaneously imminent, yet also distant. Distant after 3 decades. He placed it ceremoniously beneath his coffee mug on the scrubbed table. Fleeting thoughts of a new roof or a truck felt unreal. December brought hard frosts. On a snow-dusted Christmas Eve, Bing Crosby's voice drifted from the radio. Thomas poured bourbon into a tumbler, lifting it toward the empty chair opposite. "Bill, you better be having one up there too," he murmured softly. The liquor's burn offered strange comfort, his mind drifting to past patrols, silences, rejections, and the unnerving precision of Bill's burial flag. At midnight, he turned off the radio. He folded the April letter neatly and placed it atop the towering stack of correspondence. This time he tied the bundles twined just a fraction more loosely. He stood at the door, gazing at the snow-lit yard under distant bells. 4 more months. He breathed. Inside the shack held its familiar warmth and flawless order, poised for whatever came next. March dawned clear. Stepping onto the porch with warm coffee, Thomas felt an unusual lightness in the spring air, his morning ritual complete. He saw his old bicycle. After breakfast, he wheeled it into sunlight, checked the tires and brakes, and set off on a gentle neighborhood loop. The steady rhythm felt deeply soothing. He raised a hand to Mrs. Wilkins at her window and past Mr. Porter, raking his lawn, absorbing the quiet order of waking homes. and flags stirring in the breeze, pedaling easily, a rare ease settled over him. He considered simple tasks like sharpening the mower blade. Slowing at an intersection, he noted a lone car approaching leisurely behind. Pushing confidently into the curve, the unguarded thought formed, "This is a good morning." He remained blissfully unaware it would be his final moment. The car's gentle hum abruptly sharpened. Swerving unexpectedly, it clipped Thomas's rear tire. His bike lurched violently, throwing him into the air. He glimpsed a chaotic blur before impact. Shoulder hip head striking pavement, sharp pain exploded, alarmed voices rose around his dazed form. He saw his crumpled cap in the grass, and the distraught driver apologizing frantically about her phone. An older man urged stillness as sirens wailed. Paramedics lifted him efficiently onto a stretcher. His last conscious sight was the weathered cap abandoned in the sunlit grass. Harsh hospital light pierced his blurred vision. Pain tethered him to the beeping machines. Murmured voices discussed a severe brain bleed requiring ICU care. Fragments surfaced, dense jungle rain and the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of distant rotor blades. Later, Sarah Collins entered, clutching a thick file stamped "Finalized." Seeing Thomas motionless amidst tubes and wires rendered the paperwork absurd. She stepped closer. "Mr. Reed," she stated to his unresponsive form, "it's done. You're getting everything owed." "Only equipment answered. She placed the folder confirming his full April pension approval on the bedside table. Moments later, the doctor entered, glanced at the monitors and gave a subtle shake of his head. Sarah lingered, watching the faint rise of his say-so. She left the finalized file untouched. That night, Thomas sank deeper. The beeping slowed, the light seemed to withdraw. In his fading mind, he was effortlessly back on the bicycle, coasting smoothly down a sunlit street, wind cool against his face. He never felt the precise moment his heart stopped. An embossed U.S. seal adorned the VA envelope delivered to Thomas Reed's silent shack a week later. Sarah Collins retrieved it from the mailbox in the late afternoon. Stepping inside the profoundly still and ordered space, boots perfectly aligned bedsheets with sharp corners, an empty mug resting upside down. She felt the heavy weight of absence. Opening the envelope confirmed the full pension and substantial back pay. Her hands trembled, imagining Thomas finally reading these words, but only the clock's insistent ticking filled the room. Her eyes caught his familiar, now bent and smudged cap hanging on the wall peg. The unwavering order felt both comforting and unbearably sad. Lingering, she touched the worn chair back, the clean countertop, sensing his precise hand in every detail. She placed the opened letter, spotlighted by the fading window light, on the table and carefully locked the door. Driving away, she understood. Finalized was technically true, yet resonated only as a promise delivered too late. Later, a small group of veterans gathered quietly on the porch, clad in old field jackets and faded caps. They carried offerings, a battered radio like Thomas's, a neatly folded American flag, a pack of his strong black coffee. They stood silently in the cold air before sharing sparse memories, his meticulous care, cleaning a rifle in the rain, fixing a sputtering field stove, sharing his last cigarettes. They spoke sparingly of the jungle's humidity and the strange green mist they later knew as Agent Orange. Sarah stood apart, holding the VA decision, when one veteran nodded at it and whispered, "Too late, though." She offered no contradiction. As the fiery orange afternoon light washed over the porch, the veterans drifted away. They left the old radio on the top step, the coffee by the door, and the folded flag on the empty rocking chair. Sarah remained until the deepening cold bit sharply. Before leaving, she placed the official VA envelope beneath the corner of the flag on the chair, securing it against the rising wind. The shack stood silent in the deepening dusk. Some promises are kept, others broken, and some arrive only when there is no one left to hear them. Thomas Reed's long, patient fight wasn't waged for medals, but for the fundamental recognition of a debt owed, for basic dignity, and for a solemn promise to a soldier that should never have required a 30-year battle to be kept. That's all about our stories. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the story? Please share it in the comments below.